From the land of lakes, this is 10,000 Takes, brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another month as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. And Wally, we've now made that official pivot from winter into spring. And that means the pro teams who play primarily in the winter here in Minnesota are long gone. That would be the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Wild, who skated into the offseason with a whimper. Boy, did they go out not looking good, losing in 6 games to Dallas. In the last 2 games, it was Dallas domination.
Yeah, and the Wild were just no-shows. I mean, especially on offense. They just could not do a thing. They hung in there in that 6th and final game for a little while, but disappointing to go out now 7 straight seasons in the first round. There's got to be some changes, you would think. Where are they going to happen? Are they going to happen on the coaching staff? Are they going to happen on the ice? Are they going to happen in the front office? I mean, how long could this mediocrity go? And I know you and I have discussed it in depth on the radio, but the fact that Kirill Kaprizov was basically held completely in check in the postseason, that's a huge difference maker. Now, was he still, hobbling a little bit from that injury? Who knows? But the fact of the matter is that guy was the leading scorer percentage-wise for his team before he got hurt of anybody in the National Hockey. He scored a higher percentage of Minnesota's goals than anybody else in hockey, and he just didn't do anything for him in the postseason. I mean, give Dallas credit, but that's the fact.
Yeah, he was on a milk carton, as was Matt Boldy.
Right.
Kirill 1 goal in 6 games, Boldy 3 assists in 6 games. That's not going to cut it.
No.
Especially when Jake Ottinger, the kid from Lakeville, was outstanding in goal for the Dallas Stars. Yeah, maybe Kirill wasn't 100%, but look, he was out there on the ice. I mean, you carve your legacy in the postseason. We talked about it with the Timberwolves in their playoff series. Same thing for the Wild. If you're a no-show in the playoffs, people forget about you quickly, and the Minnesota Wild are definitely on a playoff treadmill. Their special teams are subpar. I mean, when Dallas had the man advantage, the Stars capitalized. When the Wild were on the power play, they struggled. We talked about Kirill and Matt Boldy, and there's a lot of reasons why this team is already out on the golf course. And here's another thing that has to be real painful if you're a Wild fan. Zach Parise in New Jersey are still playing.
Oh, boy.
Ryan Suter in Dallas are still playing. Now, who knows how far those teams will go, but they're still skating and still trying to get a Stanley Cup for their respective teams.
I'm going to say this, and I said it when they released him. I understood the Parise thing. His minutes were dwindling, and things weren't going so well between him and the front office and him and Dean Evison. I never understood the Ryan Suter thing. Suter was really good against the Minnesota Wild in this series, and I think that they missed him. They would have loved to have had Ryan Suter back at the blue line. He was a shutdown blue liner.
Yeah, I'm sure Jake Ottinger is glad he's on his side.
Absolutely.
Of Dallas, as the Stars now face the upstart Seattle Kraken. How about that? Stars and Kraken. I mean, the whole NHL's been it's been turned upside down. It's been topsy-turvy. Boston Bruins are gone.
Right.
Colorado Avalanche, the reigning Stanley Cup champs, have been bounced. And we see it every year in the NHL now. We see a lot of parity. But the one team that can't crack through is Minnesota. Doesn't matter if they're a lower seed or even a bit higher. They just can't break through that barrier. And I don't know what Bill Guerin's going to do. And I think the fan base is very frustrated.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you see some of that frustration with Bill Guerin as well. He was a little testy in his postseason press conference. Some of the questions he was asked, he's pretty defensive. And he needs to be because, look, it hasn't changed much from Chuck Fletcher. They were one and done 4 straight years with Fletcher and now 3 straight years with Guerin. How is it different?
Really isn't different. And you look at when the Minnesota North Stars were here, 26 seasons, no cups. Now, they went to the finals twice. At least they got there. Minnesota Wild now 23 seasons in. No Stanley Cups, never have been to the finals. This is a franchise that I would say, based on playoff results, is barely above mediocre. They do a great job of marketing. They fill up a wonderful arena, the X. We go there a lot. I love that place. But the hockey, come on, they don't deliver in the postseason.
And if they do deliver at some point, will it be with a different goaltender? Because, as good as Philip Gustafsson was in the very first game of the series, he was so-so the rest of the way. And Marc-Andre Fleury was not very good in game 2. So do you bring these two guys back again next year? I think that question's out there, too.
I definitely think they saw enough out of Philip Gustafsson to bring him back. Marc-Andre Fleury's going to be in the Hall of Fame, but he's on the tail end. I think we've seen that. And Dean Evason's decision to, after the great game that Fleury had, or I should say Gustafsson had in game 1, to go to Fleury in game 2 and watch him just get battered. I think it was 7 goals. Maybe one was an empty net, I'm not sure. But that decision, I think, was not a good one. They should have stuck with the hot hand Gustafsson.
And it was a springboard into what happened the rest of the series. Even though they did win game 3 and were up 2-1. But
just like last year against St. Louis.
And
they had home ice against the Blues.
Go figure.
Yeah. All right, well, we have a lot more coming up. We're going to talk Twins baseball with the 2-time World Series champ Al Newman. This is 10K Takes, your Pucks ticket.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision. It's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Welcome back, 10,000 Takes. And as the Minnesota Twins head to Cleveland this weekend, they are a first-place team. And I don't know if you're surprised at this point if the Twins are in first place. But, I mean, the division has just been a mess. And so that's where they are. And we're joined now by Al Newman, the former Minnesota Twin, 2-time world champion. Al, are you surprised that the Twins have been so successful this early on? And why do you think that has been?
Well, I mean, let's start with the reality that they finally went out and put together a quality rotation with legitimately 4 or 5 starters. I honestly believe the Lopez trade kind of sealed the rotation. It's a little bit deep when you've got guys like Over and Varland down in St. Paul who's been back and forth to help the rotation. But I honestly believe it's been pitching and defense, and the fact that Sonny Gray has stayed healthy, and Joe Ryan is coming up and doing what he was advertised to do, and we play better defense. And unfortunately, with some of the teams in our division right now, they're still trying to get their feet up under them. So the Twins do have a 3-game lead, 17-12.
Yeah, Al, when was the last time you could say that a Minnesota Twins pitcher was on top of the ERA list in the majors? That would be Sonny Gray, and then Joe Ryan, your wins leader, at least 5-0 out of the gate. I mean, it's rare air for this Twins pitching, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you have to go back to Johan Santana, Brad Rackey when Loesch and those guys were all around. You'd have to go quite a ways back to find 3 starting pitchers of this quality in the late 2000.
Are you confident in the other 2 spots? And I'll say spots because we've already seen Kenta Maeda and Tyler Mahle both be shut down with injuries. But you mentioned Ober and Garland. Are these guys Varland, I should say, are these guys going to be able to toe the line for him?
I believe so. Both of them have a little release point. That was one thing that always concerned me about the Twins was that most of their pitchers all threw from the same arm slot. And, we have an assortment of guys with Over being, the tall guy that throws downhill but pitches up. You've got Varland with heavy sink, more like a Scott Erickson type guy when he first came up. So there's a different assortment of pitchers for the 5 days, even though all 5 of them are right-handed. So I think it gives the hitters a different look. And the fact that we have athletic position players are very strong up the middle now that Polanco's back. We know Correa has range. Miranda's quite mobile. And Gallo has played very well over at first base. And we still have a gold glove center fielder in Mr. Taylor. So I think between pitching and defense and some timely hitting throughout 1 through 9, I think the Twins are very competitive. I know Cleveland, is always dangerous, Wally, and that's your team. They're always dangerous with Terry Francona, leading that ship. But I think the Twins can be competitive down the stretch.
Al, when do you think Byron Buxton goes back to center field? You're right. Michael A. Taylor is not really much of a drop-off. He's got a gold glove of his own. Buxton's been hitting the ball from the DH slot, but I feel like he's a five-tool guy, and don't you want him out there eventually?
Most definitely. We had this discussion today out on the golf course, and I said I would be surprised if Buxton played or actually started 35 games in the outfield. I don't know where I got that number from, but, it's just one of those things. As long as we can keep them healthy, and we've got Taylor and Gordon that can fill in out there, a right-left combination. Yes, it's a drop-off when Gordon goes out, but he's quite athletic. But I think Buxton will play about 35 to 50 games, and we'll see what happens, especially since even if you play a National League team, you can continue to use the designated hitter.
You mentioned Jorge Polanco. He's just been great so far. Got off to a really hot start, handful of home runs, and made some terrific plays at second base too. I think that people have kind of forgotten about him because of the injuries and because you have Carlos Correa, and the Twins have made a lot of overtures in improving the lineup. But let's not forget, Jorge Polanco was an all-star a couple of years ago.
Oh, most definitely. Very underrated. You've got a switch hitter. I think he's the longest tenured Twin now with about 9 or 10 years. I think he's been a consistent performer throughout his career. And it reminds me a lot of Greg Gagne. He wasn't a guy that people thought of, but I thought he was the top 5, top 8 shortstop during that era when Ripken and Trammell and Fernandez and all those guys were playing. So he goes under the radar, but I tell you what, the team has kind of picked up his pace a little bit with his batting order the last 4 or 5 games.
Any concerns, Al, about Carlos Correa offensively? I mean, he's off to a slow start. He's sputtering as far as the batting average goes, or is it just one of those situations where he's going to have a hot couple of weeks and suddenly he's batting 280?
Well, I thought about it last week, and then I thought about Miranda, and you think of some of the Latin players we have on our team, and I hate to use this, but, man, it's been cold. It's been very cold, and you've seen the way the guys have been bundled up. And I think he's going to heat up. I'm not worried about him. He's been driving the ball to right field, hitting in a little bit of tough luck. But, you're talking to a 230 career hitter, so I don't have too much sympathy for him. But I think he'll pull out of it.
I don't know if you watched any tape of Joey Gallo last year with the Dodgers or the Yankees, but what's the difference? Why is Joey Gallo as successful as he has been this year, and last year he was just a disaster with the Yankees and Dodgers?
We'll just mention 2 of the biggest markets in the game, L.A. and New York. When he had his best years, I believe he was down in Texas, somewhat flying underneath the radar. I'm not saying the Twins are off the radar, but we are a comfortable spot to come play. And no offense to Minnesota or the surrounding area, but the media coverage doesn't dog you every day like they do in LA and New York, especially if there's expectations for you to be a guy that carries the team. So I think he's comfortable here. He's not going to rotate up into that 4 or 5 slot too often. I think Rocco's going to place him down there in the 6th, 7th hole and just let him be comfortable.
Al, do you think it takes a certain kind of mindset to thrive in a New York City, a Boston, a Philadelphia, a Chicago, a Los Angeles, where your every move is microanalyzed and there's heavy media criticism? Does it take a certain psyche to do well there?
Well, you know what? When you go there and you cut your hair above the collar and you can't have a goatee or a mustache, you can probably have a mustache, but you can't have a beard. There's different expectations. I mean, you guys have been there many times, and when you walk into the stadium, the first thing you see is 26, 27 World Series champions. And so when you come, there are expectations beyond what you've ever thought. And unfortunately, it takes guys a while. I mean, I take, for example, Aaron Hicks. When he first went there, we thought, where was this guy when he played here in Minnesota? He goes to New York, and then he gets a big payday. And, man, they're about ready to run him out of town right now. So it does take a different type of guy to go in there with that type of scrutiny each and every game.
They didn't even like Roger Maris when he hit 61 home runs for the Yankees.
Exactly. They wanted the other guy. It's just a tough place. And I know I hate to go back to when we played, but the aura was still Yankee Stadium, but it was mostly Don Mattingly, and they weren't very good at that time. But things change, and their expectations, their history is that of a champion.
How much credit do you give to the, let's call it, flexibility of Rocco Baldelli this year? Because let's face it, I saw him do a suicide squeeze the other day. He's letting his pitchers go into the 6th, 7th, maybe occasionally even the 8th inning. I've seen a few pitchers go over 100 pitches. I mean, these are all things, I should say, complaints that folks like us had over the last year or so, where he's cutting the pitchers short, where they weren't doing anything but, swinging for the fences. How much of that do you think is attributed to their success this year?
Most definitely. I mean, you look at the bullpen with Lopez, Duran, and Jackson. You've got the three-headed monster, to get the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings secured for a victory. I think it's one of the first times since Rocco's been here that he's had a rotation that he felt he could trust. I mean, there's a development issue here, with the Twins. We finally got Joe Ryan up, and we got Ober, and Barlin, but most of the stalwarts in our rotation came from the outside. So it was just a matter of, I think, of him getting players or pitchers that he thought could handle the extra workload. They threw strikes early in the game, which gave him a little more a peace of mind in keeping their starters out there 6, 7, and 8 innings. It's awesome to see. I do like the fact that the guys at the bottom of the order, and I think that's mostly Mr. Taylor, they're taking it up on themselves to execute and create offense with that punt. They pulled that out 2 or 3 times here in the last 10 games.
Yep.
And I like it. I really do.
Yeah. All right, Al. Good stuff as usual. We will check in with you here in a few weeks.
All right. Take care, man. Go Twins.
Go Twins. All right. He is Al Newman, the former Minnesota Twin, of course, 2-time world champion, right here on 10,000 Takes. Stay with us.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Well, the NBA playoffs continue to roll along, of course, without the Minnesota Timberwolves. As you well know, they've been out of it for a while now. However, there are several former Timberwolves, so you could live vicariously through any one of a number, especially the guys that were traded this season. Case in point, your guy D'Angelo Russell with the Lakers, and LeBron and company taking on Steph Curry and that gang. I mean, there's Andrew Wiggins in there. I mean, there's plenty of guys to talk about, right?
A lot of angles. Golden State, LA Lakers. Of course, the Lakers once upon a time were in Minneapolis. I know that's decades ago, but they did begin here. They won 5 titles here. Then you look in the East, Miami and the New York Knicks. Jimmy Butler, Kevin Love for the Heat.
Right.
Tibbs is coaching the Knicks, Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah.
And Derrick Rose is still on that roster in New York. So there's a lot of guys who were here, if not really recently, at least in recent, the last few years or so. And, Jimmy Butler, I know he basically talked his way out of Minnesota.
Oh, yes.
He was an ornery guy when he left, but I think that was all orchestrated. He knew that the mix here wasn't a championship cocktail, if you will. And he got himself out. And look at him now.
No, he basically said that Karl Anthony Towns is soft and wasn't going to win a championship with Karl Anthony Towns on the roster. And so far, he's been right.
And let's not forget, Kevin Love said, I want out of here. He was never above 500 with the Timberwolves. I mean, he had double-double every night, but they never had a winning team. So he got smart and wised up like Kevin Garnett did, and all these guys before him and some after. Andrew Wiggins got banged on constantly. He's already got a ring with Golden State. Who knows? He might get another one.
Yeah, and then, the Lakers, as I mentioned, have D'Angelo Russell and Jared Vanderbilt and Malik Sealy, and those are all guys that the Timberwolves kicked to the curb, too. So
D'Lo.
Well, yeah, I said D'Angelo Russell. Okay. I know you only go by D'Lo.
D'Angelo,
yes, yeah. So, all right, let's move on. Your Vikings had a draft last weekend, and I don't think that they addressed any immediate needs other than replacing Adam Thielen. Beyond that, of course, they didn't have a second-round pick. That was the T.J. Hawkinson trade. Did you see this draft class that the Vikings got in 2023 as maybe a placeholder? Just like, okay, we're just going to try and get to 2024 or 2025 because I don't think any of these guys is going to jump in right away with one obvious exception.
Well, I think they expect, instant gratification from the wideout Addison from USC.
Yep.
I would think the cornerback from USC as well, Mackay, they better get him on the field quick because they're not exactly deep at that position.
No, that's what I'm saying.
So they need to get those guys productive right away. Really, I think you want something from everybody. That's the goal in a draft. I don't know. They only had a handful of picks, and I think their receiving game should get better. I mean, everybody seems to love Addison's speed, his route running. His desire to become elite. I mean, he's coming in here with the mindset that I'm as good as Justin Jefferson. And that's okay. That's what you want.
Well, let's hope he is.
Yeah. Well, if he's half as good, they'll be happy. So, but I think the Minnesota Vikings they're still a team that's reloading. Are they rebuilding? Maybe in another division they would be, but in the NFC North, they might be good enough to win it again.
Yeah. Well, right now, all the talk is that Detroit is the favorite in this division right now. Would you agree with that much? Because, aside from the arrests and the guys kicked out of the league and all this other stuff, they were trending up at the end of the season without question.
Yeah, they knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs on a Sunday night at Lambeau when they had absolutely nothing to play for. I like Detroit. I think their coach, Dan Campbell, he's very energetic. I think he's a good fit for that team. But can they handle, success? Can they handle now expectations? They've never had that.
History says no.
And you're right. And already the gambling thing, I mean, that's a setback. But I would say Detroit and pencil would be one of your favorites. Chicago Bears, I mean, they are totally in a massive rebuild. Green Bay Packers, it's all about Jordan Love. Yeah. How good is he going to be? So I think that NFC North is up for grabs. Minnesota's the reigning champ. Paper champ, maybe some would say.
Yeah. Well, I think the Vikings are the favorites. I know that Las Vegas likes Detroit right now, but the Vikings are the favorites in what should be a weak division, and they may win it again and be one and done again, but we're used to that with our team.
Yeah, this may come down to Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins, who has the better season. Whereas you look at Justin Fields and Jordan Love, they may be great quarterbacks someday, but we're still waiting on, how good are they going to be?
Yeah. All right, more to come. Takes of the day up next. You are watching 10,000 Takes, your purple ticket. Stay with us.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years.
I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Welcome back. Final segment of 10,000 Takes. Ben Johnson's been getting a lot of heat for not getting guys in here, right? I mean, they had another subpar season, actually a subpar season this last year. And you and I have pontificated that it has a lot to do with the NIL, not able to get money for guys because they're going to these other major conferences and players in major conferences that can pay them, basically. They can pay these players. What do you think of this theory that because Minneapolis-St. Paul, it's a huge market as far as, big-time sponsors. But all that sponsorship money, perhaps, instead of going to NILs, is going to a market that has 4 pro teams, not to mention the Loons, not to mention the Lynx. Do you agree with that?
Well, obviously a lot of it does. But we're talking about Fortune 500 or in some cases Fortune 100 companies right here in the Twin Cities. So that means they're, multi-billion-dollar corporations. There's enough money to give to your local university, your D1 school, the U of M. I know St. Thomas plays D1 now as well. And I've always said the Gophers got to tap into 3M. They have to tap into Pillsbury.
Wait a minute. 3M just laid off 1,100 people.
There's that. You're right. Does that mean the Gophers need to change the name on their hockey arena? Well, General Mills. Caitlin Clark, we saw her at a Timberwolves playoff game a couple of weeks ago. She's already in the high 700 to 800K mark for NIL money in Iowa City. So this extends to Gopher women's hoops too now. So it is the reality of today's sports. And Minnesota better figure it out or the Gophers are going to be, dare I say it, worse than they've been.
Oof, yeah. Should we do takes now?
We should do a take of the day for you and me. We'll find out if you're an angry American, a grumpy guardian, or a demanding diva. What is it?
Well, I'm going to circle back to the National Basketball Association. As you know, playoffs are going on without the Timberwolves as they bowed out in the first round again. And Karl Anthony Towns part of that mix. So they have some decisions to make. Do they bring back that same starting 5, bringing back, obviously, Jaden McDaniels, who was part of the starting 5 most of the season, and Rudy Gobert, and Karl Anthony Towns, and Michael Conley, and Anthony Edwards? The question becomes, how far are you going to go with this? Do you run it back, so to speak, or do you try to trade Rudy Gobert? Well, I don't know how much you're going to get for Rudy Gobert at this juncture. I mean, you gave away a boatload to get him. I don't think anybody's looking at that and saying, gee, let's give them just as much as they gave away, right? They watched Rudy play. No way. So does that mean you'd have to trade Karl Anthony Towns if you want to get some value? I don't know, man. He's got a big salary cap hit coming. Rudy's going to get $44 million coming up soon. Wow. Big Cat's going to get about $50 million. Yeah. They need to get some value at some point. They either have to win it all or get some value and trade one of these guys. And I say, trade the Cat. Get the Cat out of the bag now.
Wow. Let's check that mood meter out. Demanding diva. Mm-hmm. Holy guacamole. Well, I was going to do a take on Aaron Rodgers and how he's trying to really get comfortable in New York City, going to Rangers and Knicks games, and he's cut his hair and he's clean shaven and all that.
You're switching it up, huh?
I am, because I'm going to respond to what you just said.
Okay.
Don't trade Cat.
All
and
right.
Here's why. Because I promise you, I guarantee you, whoever would acquire him, Cat will win an NBA title within 2 or 3 years. We saw it with Andrew Wiggins. We saw it with Kevin Love. We saw it with KG, Kevin Garnett. There are teams out there foaming at the mouth who would love to have Cat. And I don't trust Tim Conley to get fair value in return.
Okay, can I change my mind on that? I don't want Tim Conley to make the deal either.
Scratch the mood meter. We'll revisit it next week. On that note, we got to go. Let's FedEx out those thank yous. One to Alex Yambrick, David Weld, Al Newman, Rocky. For Wally, I'm Eric saying so long. This is 10K Takes, your sports ticket.